This is The Weekly Set, an official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com.
I wish I was the monster you think I am.
You have come here to beseech me?
Can't ask for your soul.
Madness can be a medicine for the modern world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. I'm your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
Today, this is episode 251 of the podcast, recorded on April 20th, 2020. And we are going to be talking about Lost Season 4 as part of our ongoing rewatch of Lost. This is, like Will and I have discussed this multiple times, this is for both of us. This is our favorite season of Lost. I'd say objectively the best season of Lost.
I would say, I would agree with you. I agree. It's funny too, because as you've noted before, this is the season where the writer's strike occurred, and that's why it is such a short season. But we've always talked a lot about this podcast on how, especially with streaming stuff, streaming introduced the concept of these shorter TV seasons, that we see, and we kind of speculate that leads to better, more tightly paced, writing, like seasons of episodes.
It's more quality control, really.
Yeah, it's more quality control. There's not a lot of meandering. There's not a lot, and I don't think Lost was too guilty for that, even with the full seasons. But like with just 14 episodes to work with, I feel like they really nailed it here. They really told a narrative and just really all thriller, no filler.
There were maybe 2 episodes that were a little bit on the slower side, but even those were still good episodes.
Right.
They just weren't as tight. You could have cut down probably 2 episodes from the series and made it super tight,
Which episodes are you referring to?
I can't even remember off the top of my head. There was one I noted. When I was putting out my tweets, I noted it. I think it might have been wasn't Sun's episode. It might have been one after that or something. It was right between when we started getting used to all the flash forwards and when the actual real plot heavy stuff from season 4 started kicking in. Between there was a space of 1.5, 2 episodes that were a little bit slower. Maybe it was Juliet's first episode of the season.
Oh, the other woman?
It might have been that. I don't know.
That's the one that instantly sprung to my mind.
Yeah, it was around that point in the series. It was pretty much right in the middle of the season.
Yeah, the other woman's kind of a weak episode in the season, even though I love Juliet's character and everything.
It's still good. It's just weak compared to the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's still good. Also, I think it's kind of irrelevant because it showed Ben's obsession with Juliet, which doesn't really factor into anything at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's kind of because of the events that happen, it kind of Ben may have been obsessed with Juliet, and that's nice to know, but it has no bearing going forward.
It was a lingering artifact of season 2, and season 3 is love triangle stuff.
Right, exactly.
We need more love triangle stuff, and we need the dangerous man that's obsessed kind of area,
kind of area, yeah. And Ben's character arc completely transforms in this season, so it does feel kind of a relic. So yeah, that episode is kind of stands out to me for that reason.
Yeah, there's that episode. There's something else too. I can't remember. It wasn't even the full episode. The other episode I'm thinking of, it wasn't the full episode wasn't really slow or irrelevant or something. There was a bit of fluff in it, and I can't even remember what episode it was. That's how unimportant it is in the main, in the flow of things.
In the flow of things. Other than that, other than that, I really have to struggle or nitpick to come up with anything. I thought it was great. They introduced 4 new characters in this.
Oh yeah,
season.
and they did it so good.
And they did so so well, yeah.
It's like, I think I tweeted out on the second episode when we met, like, all the other characters, I was saying that, like, we met 4 characters, well, actually 3, because we met Daniel Faraday, like, at the very end of the last episode before it, we met, like, 4 episodes, and this is, like, the antithesis of, Mickey and Paolo.
It is.
It's like Mickey and Paolo could be, like, taught in a course for writing of how not to introduce a character. And then, like, these 4 characters, which is, Daniel Faraday, Charlotte, right?
Yep, Charlotte,
Miles, and
the pilot.
Lapidus.
Lapidus, yeah.
Yeah. The introduction of those 4 characters is like a masterclass in how to introduce characters.
Yeah.
So it's like you have these polar opposites of that. So that's kind of fascinating.
Because they're dropped into the show, but they're, literally dropped into the show, but they're done so, like, very naturally.
They're mysterious. You don't know, you're not kind of completely clear on their motivations. The first episode where you're really focusing on them shows little bits of their backstory, but only enough to make them intriguing, not enough to really give you a full clue of who they are.
Right, exactly. Only enough to give you, like, an idea. They don't get backstory episodes outside of that first introduction. So far, not in season 4 at least. So they remain mysterious throughout the seasons, and you're even getting up to the end, you're still unclear of their motivations. They're heavily tied in to the new conflict that was set up at the end of season 3.
Yeah, but even by the end of season 4, you realize that a lot of them are more deeply connected than even that.
Right.
There's like, and it's done with like a lot of kind of throwaway lines, which I actually really like. Like, I like that line of like Miles saying to Charlotte, like, I'm surprised you're so eager to leave after how long it took you to get back here. And it's like, wait, get back here? And it's like, it's just such a throwaway line. It's so quick, but it's like, it's intriguing.
And it's like, funny because they're not only tied to the conflict, but one of the characters is especially important to the major twist the series takes, which isn't fully realized till season 5. Mm-hmm. But one of the characters is heavily intrinsic. One of these new characters is heavily intrinsic to that. So it's interesting.
Yeah. It's just, it's a really good season for that. These characters are really great additions. I think the best additions, as much as you had problems with season 2, these are the best additions since season 2.
Yes. I hated season 2, but season 2 did give me Desmond and Ben.
And Echo.
It's like, who unfortunately didn't stick around too long.
Hey, he was in, was that episode in season 4 or was it in season 5?
No, what?
Was it season 4 or season 5 where Hurley referenced Echo again?
No, it's season 5.
Okay, yeah, so we're not there yet.
Yeah, it was the episode where...
So Mr. Echo kind of has a cameo in season 5. Kind of. He has a Clint Eastwood directed cameo.
Hurley's talking to dead people.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. Which we see some of that. Speaking of Hurley, speaking to dead people, the first episode has Hurley talking to Charlie, in the flash forwards. Because one thing we failed to mention, I can't believe we failed to mention this. In the last podcast, we failed to mention that they started doing a new thing with the flashbacks. They started doing flash forwards.
Yeah, that was kind of like the very end of the season.
Yeah,
like it was the stinger reveal at the very end of the episode that it was a flash forward.
Yeah, that was a flash forward. So this season, with only a couple of exceptions like Locke's episode and Juliet's episode, which are flashbacks, the majority of the episodes have flash forward showing the characters, showing the Oceanic Six, the 6 people who managed to get off the island, showing their lives after they got off the island, which is 3 years later from the action that is happening on the island.
Yeah. Well, it's not when it spans time. It's not completely 3 years later. Like the first flash forward was 3 years later.
Aren't they
like some of the other ones
in that time frame?
What?
Aren't they all supposed to be in that general time frame, like of 3 years?
No,
later?
They span like 3 years.
Okay.
The flash forwards span about 3 years. So because the whole time on the island was supposed to only be like a couple months.
Oh, really?
And then everything from that point, like there's 3 years to the point where Jack is telling Kate that they have to go back.
Right.
That's like 3 years after they got off the island.
Oh yeah, that's right, because they do different things, because they show different points after they get off the island. Yeah, because they show Kate's trial. which features a Jack as a witness who is clearly not angry and depressed and suicidal like we saw him in the flash forwards in season 3.
No beard.
No beard. Not screaming that we have to go back, like he seems pretty well.
Here's the funny thing is like the strike season was like all about growing beards, even on Lost.
I think with the quarantine, like this 2020 will also be about growing beards.
I think 2020 is all about like not wearing pants.
Do you have to wear pants? You have to wear pants.
Kate's car stops. She gets out, like, not wearing pants.
Yeah.
We have to wear pants? No, we don't have to wear pants. I'm never wearing pants again.
Yeah.
So, let's continue on. We get sidetracked easily with our little jokes.
Yes, but it's fun. It makes the podcast better.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So we talked about the introduction of these 4 characters and how they're kind of interesting. We also get, and it started in season 3, at the very end of season 3, we get this interesting use of Charles Widmore now as this like grand antagonist.
Yeah, Charles Widmore is now like Cobra Commander.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
He went from being an asshole potential father-in-law for Desmond to being this like integral character to the island story. And now we know he's somehow connected to the island. We don't know the full details of that yet.
Yeah, apparently like we show a fast forward, Ben is off the island, which we find out how that happens. But Ben is off the island, and we see in one of the flash forwards Ben confronting Charles Widmore in his bedroom. We should note that the 4 characters we talked about, they come off the boat freighter. They're not the only people on that freighter. They're all people hired by Charles Widmore, and there is a team of mercenaries led by this one like beefed up like Kimi, like this muscle bound guy who has like no morals, no compassion, no compunction about just killing anybody he wants or who gets in his way. And he's ruthless.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this leads us to, we had to say goodbye to several characters this season, most notably Rousseau, Alex's boyfriend.
Carl!
Yeah.
Gotta give that a Walking Dead kick there. Carl!
And ultimately, tragically, to Ben's shock, Alex herself by Kimi's hand.
Yeah, man, it's a fucked up scene that like, and I tweeted this out after watching the episode, but it's like, at that point, I never thought that Ben would be I don't know if likable is the right way to put it, a relatable character,
Right.
A sympathetic character.
I think it's the first time that we saw like evidence that Ben does care about somebody, you know, like in a genuine way, like before that he's always been like a manipulator. You manipulate people around him. We never seen him like show any genuine emotional attachment to anybody.
It's also the first time that we learned that Michael Emerson's creepy bug eyes can be used to show great shock rather than just be creepy.
It's a great scene too, because Ben's trying to bluff, and he doesn't, and there's even a part of Ben that doesn't believe that's even going to happen. And so he thinks he can bluff his way out of it. And Kimi just does it. And the look of shock on Ben's eyes, because for once an outcome, Ben didn't plan happened.
Yeah, and then Ben made a phone call.
Then Ben revealed that he has some control over the smoke monster.
Yeah, which was a badass scene.
Yeah, that was a badass scene. Because Ben just despondent walks into like his hidden cave entrance, or like locking everybody's like asking him, what's going on, what he's doing, and he's not responding. He's just muttering to himself and saying he broke the rules. He broke the rule, or like something like that. And like he just goes into the cave, and then the smoke monster comes out of nowhere and wrecks those commandos.
Yeah, that was really cool. Not just because of that, but it's like you get that moment with Ben where you start to realize that he is kind of a legitimate badass ass when he's pushed, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not because he's like a big guy or he's particularly tough, it's because he's relentless. And we get that now as a sympathetic character with him having these actions. Instead of just lying and bluffing, we see the kind of resources he has at his disposal, combined with his ruthlessness, combined with now being a sympathetic character in this moment. And it's kind of satisfying, but like it screws over all of our favorite characters. And that's kind of the dynamic that I thought was really interesting with Ben in this season, is like there's that moment where Ben has that, you see him off the island where he's threatening Charles Widmore when Widmore's in his bed, and he's saying like, I'm gonna kill your daughter or something like that, you know? All I could think of when he was saying that was like, yeah, fuck you, you know, like, yeah, totally, Widmore, you deserve that. And then it's like, wait a minute, his daughter's Penny.
Yeah.
I don't want Penny to die.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking, oh, that's gonna be a problem for Desmond.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to disrupt Desmond and Penny. Those are like, you know, those are a great couple. I want them to be happy. Don't kill her. Like, find some other way to stick it to him. You know, force him to have another daughter and then kill her. But it's like that satisfying pure id, you know, that you get from Ben in here, where it's like you get those moments where it's like, you know, when he kills Kimi, it's so satisfying. It's like, yeah, fuck him, you know? But at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, he just caused that boat to explode. At the end of the season. It's like, at the end of the season when killing Kimi, oh man, you know, it's really satisfying, but then it's like, oh fuck.
Well, yeah, because Locke points out that everybody on the boat's gonna die, and oh man, the coldest moment ever for Ben, because like Locke is like, everybody on that boat is gonna die now, and Ben just goes, so?
Yeah.
Like,
that's the thing. That's the interesting thing, is because they've made Ben a sympathetic character, but he's still Ben. He's still exactly who he always was. We just have a better understanding of him now.
Yeah.
And by having a better understanding, by having him go through a tragedy that we can kind of feel bad for and relate to, now we have this character that we can, like, he'll do some crazy thing and we're like, yeah, kick ass. And then it's like, oh shit, yeah, there's consequences to that.
Yeah.
Fuck, what have you done? You know? And then you get in that moment that realization that, like, you know, Ben doesn't give a shit about other people, not the people in his own sphere, you know?
Right, yeah, it doesn't, other people.
So yeah, that was like a kind of an interesting dynamic, I think, in episode 4, was like seeing Ben as a sympathetic character while still seeing Ben as Ben. He's still Ben. Like, we had, you know, Ben helping Saeed, and Saeed working for Ben was a big plot point in this season, where we see like Saeed, or like as I like to coin him now, Spyeed. Spyeed going around just like murdering people on like Ben's orders. It's like the most badass we've ever seen Saeed, you know?
Yeah, it is.
He's going around, he's making cool like one-liners as he's like murdering like rich assholes that were involved in this plot, you know? He's like, when he says who he is and you see the people's like faces drop, like the guy in the golf course.
Yeah,
you know, and like
the first one.
And then the guy, you can see the guy's so uncomfortable and scared, and then like, you know, Saeed just kills him ruthlessly and like leaves. And so you get these kind of moments, and then when you find out like, oh, he's doing this on Ben's orders, and you start to see like the stuff that happened to Saeed before that kind of got him to work for Ben. Like, you know, he finally, we see that he got off the island, was able to have a moment at least with this woman that he had loved, that had been like his motivating force in the early parts of like season 1 and stuff, you know, where we'd seen in his backstory, that he was able to reconnect with her and have some semblance of life with her, and then lost her.
Yeah.
So like, before we even know that he was able to meet up with her again, we're introduced to the fact that she's already dead and he's mourning her. That's like our first introduction to them meeting up again.
Right.
It's not like we get a moment of like, oh, Saeed got to meet her again, this is sweet, and then she dies. It's like, no, that's what happened in his timeline. But for us, the audience, it's like, oh, Saeed's carrying the coffin with this woman dead in it.
And, you know, I'm glad they did it that way. I'm glad they didn't go for, you know, some hackneyed, you know, emotional manipulation of the audience where we get to see Saeed reunited and they have this dramatic scene, and then later she's murdered. And we're like, oh my God, you know.
It's as funny as, because that's exactly what happened. It just wasn't our perspective.
Right. If they didn't, like, it wasn't our perspective. So it was the story, but they didn't, it wasn't done to emotionally manipulate the audience.
Yeah. So we see Saeed having lost his wife. We see him come into service for Ben. He's working for Ben. He's doing all this stuff. And then as Ben starts to become a relatable character on the show, you start to understand that more. And you're like, okay, this kind of makes more sense. And then by the end of the season, like, Saeed's clearly not working for Ben anymore.
Ben's character arc through the season is probably the most interesting thing about season 4, because Ben transforms a lot.
Yeah.
You know, especially like one of the biggest transformations is Ben's eventual acceptance that Locke is his successor.
Yeah.
You know, we saw in season 3 where, you know, Ben got jealous and threatened of Locke and tried to kill him to get him out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't stick. And so now we see Ben just accepting it.
Well, in a sense, it's not so much that Ben's changed a lot this episode, though he has changed a bit. It's more that our perception of him has changed.
Right.
Like, our understanding of his character has changed a little bit. And not to show that he's fully sympathetic. He's still the asshole he always was. It's just that there's more to him than just that, you know? And we get to understand that more in season 4. So that's like the turning point for his character. It's weird because it's rather than a lot of character development. There is some character development. It's like perception development.
What's fun is they paired Ben up with Locke and Hurley, and some of Ben's interactions with Hurley are funny. Like when
Hurley handing him the candy bar or whatever.
Hurley handing him the candy bar when Locke's in the cabin, or when Ben digs up the tin box, you know, with the mirror he needs to communicate, and there's like a thing of crackers in there, and Hurley grabs it and starts eating them, and then Ben turns to him and says, you know, those are 15 years old.
And Hurley offered this to Sawyer later on. Yeah,
Hurley's still eating them later on.
Yeah, it's really funny. That's like, Lost always has had a good sense of humor. I think it's one of the things that you kind of forget a little bit about when you've gone away from it for a while. Because you remember all the cool sci-fi stuff, you remember the character drama, and then as we're rewatching it, it's like, oh yeah, this is like, actually there's a lot of really funny stuff in here. Like we've talked before about how funny Sawyer is, you know?
Yeah.
But you also have a lot with like Hurley, of course, being funny, and just even kind of Ben being funny and other people being funny that wouldn't normally be. There's even moments that are meant to be kind of more serious, but are also funny at the same time, and not like in an unintentional way even. Like there's a scene at the very end of the season with when Jack and Hurley are on a boat after the island disappeared, and Hurley's mentioning the island disappearing, and Jack's like, the island didn't disappear, and Hurley's like, oh yeah? Because it was there, and now it's not. Yeah. And Jack just kind of looks like frustrated because he has no way to argue against that. And you can just see the frustration on his face is hilarious, you know, because he's just like, he's still sticking to his man of science thing with all evidence pointing to the contrary in this moment, you know?
Right.
So yeah, so there's a lot of great stuff with that. And should we just start talking about the Constant now?
We should talk about the Constant, absolutely. The best Desmond episode.
The best episode of TV, not just of Lost.
It's because I do this episode and then Desmond kind of falls back into the background for like the rest of the season.
He's not an integral player in this season besides that episode, and kind of like a few little bits and moments here and there. He's not as big of a player in this season as he was in the last season. But he's there, in the background, he's important, you know, like, you know, there's more to come with him. Even in like season 5, without saying anything to spoil, there's like a moment, like a great moment between him and like Faraday and stuff that like sets up something interesting in season 5. But yeah, he's not really integral to this season outside of that episode. But the episode is perhaps the greatest episode in TV history. Not just Lost, you know? It's just an amazing episode. It's something that routinely tops like critics' list of like favorite TV episodes of all time, you know? It's not just like me saying this out of the blue or something. It's commonly recognized as being such. But yeah, right. So the Constant.
Oh yeah, this is good. It's good stuff. So we know season 3. We know Desmond's been having issues since season 2, since the end of season 2, since the hatch exploded. Desmond's been having some unique issues. It's mostly manifested as him being able to see the future and see Charlie dying in multiple ways, which oddly enough, after Charlie actually dies, we don't get Desmond seeing flashes of the future anymore, which is kind of weird. But anyway,
it seemed that his flashes to the future, once he got passed from the time skip, were directly related to Charlie. They all had to do with Charlie.
Yeah, they all had to do with Charlie. But we do see this is a preference in an early episode from season 3, where the first Desmond episode from season 3 was an episode where he literally time traveled to his past, and he had the whole thing. And it kind of like that only happened once, and then we got him seeing Charlie dying. But now the constant goes back to that concept where Desmond is flashing back to moments from his past. But it's like the same thing in the first Desmond episode from season 3, where he's time traveling back to parts of his past.
Well, we should say it's not like different times of his past. It's like two very distinct timelines that are like parallel to each other.
Yeah, he's going back and forth to the present.
Time he was supposed to be in the military,
and
the time that he is on the freighter now. And this is what triggers it, is he's on the helicopter with Sayid and Lapidus heading to the freighter and Naomi's body. And like halfway there on the ride on the helicopter, he just starts flipping out. And he doesn't know who Sayid is. He doesn't know, like, he is the Desmond from this other timeline that we see. And we see that he's been dislodged from time in this. And what's interesting is that they don't just dislodge him from time, they do it in this like parallel way where like, it's like the him in his past and the him in his present have traded places in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like when he's like now on the freighter with Sayid and everybody, he's like, I don't know who any of you are. What am I doing here? I'm supposed to be on the base. Where is this? He's like confused. He thinks that he was in the middle of his, training camp, and all of a sudden he's here. And then when he's in the training camp, he's like standing around and the drill sergeant's like giving him orders, and he doesn't kind of understand why he's back there again, because he's already been there. It's his past. Why am I here? What's going on? So that's kind of the Desmond from the future. And those two, there's like a disparity between those two that's causing him a lot of confusion and making him like act kind of erratically. And we find out that he's not the only person that's suffered this, that there's two people that were on the freighter had taken a life raft off the boat, and because they wanted to get a view of the island, and by doing that they both ended up getting sick, and this is like a sickness they referred to, which is the exact same thing that's happening to Desmond basically, where they were like losing track of their time. One of them ended up dying, the other one's like strapped down to a hospital bed basically because everyone thinks he's crazy. They don't understand the time travel aspect of what's going on.
No, they don't. So interestingly enough, though, Faraday has an idea of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Faraday has, in his notebook, he's looking through it and he's talking to Sayid, who's on a radio calling in from the freighter to the beach, which is also interesting because they're starting to go into like the time disparity more of the island, which is something that they established earlier in the season when Faraday did a test where he put in coordinates and was getting a payload from the island, and the payload was already supposed to have hit, and then it took like a while after that before it actually arrived.
All right.
In fact, the payload was a timer, a stopwatch.
In fact, Faraday gave the pilot, Frank Lapidus, very specific coordinates, a very specific bearing to fly between the freighter and the island, and it's not like explained why they need to stay on that bearing, but I think it has something to do with the time disparity. Yeah. The
time disparity between the island and the freighter or the rest of the world, you could say. But there's like this gap in the time between it where they can communicate over like radio waves and stuff, but like anything physical traveling between one and the other is passing through time. Like
there's also another more evidence of this in a later episode where the doctor on the freighter, which we meet in this episode, The Constant, the doctor on the freighter washes up on the beach with his throat slit, and they radio the freighter, and the guy on the other end is like, what do you mean? The doctor's right here.
Yeah, the doctor's fine. What are you talking about? And it's like, okay, what's going on there? That's something that's later answered. But yeah, so there's a whole thing going on with the time disparity between the island and stuff. And that
This time disparity is what triggers Desmond's condition.
And it's triggered it for other people too. With
it's triggered it,
two we mentioned before. But Desmond gets in contact with Faraday, and Faraday, he's like, what time is it? You know, and Desmond says like, oh, it's something, I can't remember what year he says, but
said like 1996, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. And everyone, Saeed's like, what the fuck? You know, like when he says that.
Sometime in the 90s.
And then Daniel's like thinking about it for a second, and then he's like, you need to get to Oxford and find me in Oxford. And he gives him some stuff to tell him.
He says like, mention Eloise, you know.
Yeah.
And
like first he says, tell him that it has to oscillate at this frequency, blah, 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 whatever. And then he's all, and if that doesn't work, tell him about Eloise.
Tell him you know about Eloise. And we think Eloise is like, it's funny, we get to find out who Eloise is. It's not who you expect.
Yeah. So he goes, the next time he's back in the past, he gets himself to Oxford. He finds Faraday, who looks very different with long hair.
He's got long hair.
And he's on the campus of Oxford, and he's
berating a student.
Yeah, and he thinks that Desmond was sent there by some of the other professors that are like bullying him, basically, because he like believes in time travel and studies that, and they think he's ridiculous.
They think Desmond. He initially thinks Desmond was sent as a practical joke to like make fun of his experiments.
Mm-hmm.
But Desmond gives him the information that future Faraday gave him, and that convinces him to trust Desmond and let him into the experiment.
And he shows him this experiment. We meet who Eloise is. It's a maze running rat.
Yes.
And
he lets Eloise run the maze, and Desmond's just like got this confused look on his face, and he turns to Faraday and he's like, so that's it. So, you know, the rat ran the maze, and then like Faraday explains, no, I just built this maze. The rat hadn't run it yet.
Yeah. Hadn't taught the rat how to run the maze yet. It ran the maze as if it already knew.
Yeah.
And I want to point out before we get further, because there's more to talk about that thing though. What was the moment when you were watching The Constant when you realized it was like a truly great episode of television?
like it would have to be like the original time I watched it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just like the whole concept of the episode was really interesting and different and like fresh. I just thought, man, this is amazing. Like what they're doing with time travel here with Desmond.
Yeah. For me, it was when they started accelerating the time between his flashbacks, you could say, and the present time, when it started like getting out of control and the way it was pacing. And there was the one scene where he tripped out or whatever while he was going down the stairs. And then he like, when it went back to him, he was at the bottom of the stairs, like passed out. And you started to see how dangerous it was. That just by walking around, if he just zones out at any time, he's just like a dark, like that moment with the way it was edited, because I remember like right before it cut to him at the bottom of the stairs, like the music was peaking and then it cut and everything was silent. He was just like on the ground at the bottom of the stairs. And like, I think that was the moment where I was like, oh, this is like something special. This is really interesting. The concept's interesting. The editing's fantastic. It's like really like getting across like a message here. And that's when I really started to notice how good that episode is. And that's what ends up happening when that starts to get reinforced in the moment when Desmond is with Faraday and he zones out. And then when he wakes up again, he's like sitting in a chair and Faraday's like talking about how he had to drag him into the chair. And he's explaining about, you know, how he had the whole situation with the rat, that he had sent the rat's like consciousness basically to the future or something, or sucked it back from the future to the past, whatever it was, so that the rat knew the maze and went through. And then Desmond looks over and sees in the cage and the rat's dead. And Faraday's talking about like, yes, you know, like, well, the rat died. And, and Desmond's like, well, shit, does that mean I'm gonna die? And Faraday's basically like, yeah.
well, he won't commit to, he won't flat out tell Desmond he's going to die. You know, he kind of mealy mouths it.
He does his like nervous Faraday thing.
Yeah, he does his nervous Faraday where he's like, oh, you know, like it's different for everybody, you know.
As he's kind of looking at him with pity.
And like Desmond like just grabs him and says, am I gonna die?
Am I gonna die, brother? Am I gonna die and then see you in another life, brother?
But Faraday tells Desmond that he has a theory that he thinks could work to save Desmond, and that is Desmond needs to find his constant.
Yes,
which is where the title of the episode
something that exists in both his times, that he can make contact with in both of his times, that's like deeply important to him.
Yeah.
And he says, can that be a person? And Faraday's like, well, yeah.
Faraday says, sure, why not?
And so now Desmond realizes what he needs to do. He needs to contact Penny from the boat. The problem is that all the communication equipment was destroyed on the boat by a mysterious vigilante seeking justice against the raiders. They call him Raft Man. But anyways, they need to figure out a way for him to be able to communicate with Penny so that, and that should theoretically like balance him, make him like reconnect him with himself and make him, not dying, not being split between two times, basically. Thankfully, even though the communication stuff is all messed up, he's with Saeed, who's, he's the professor of Gilligan's Island for Lost. So they find the communication room and Saeed is able to fix everything so that Desmond is able to communicate with Penny. But he has to go and find Penny and get her number and convince her to answer his call, because this is in a moment in their past when they're in like a big fight.
Yeah.
When he had abandoned her and
Desmond's
she was apparently going to move on, and yeah.
Desmond's in the military precisely because of his situation with Penny.
Yeah, and Penny's like, you abandoned me when I thought we were moving forward. This goes into the whole dynamic of their relationship, with Desmond being a coward, as he would call himself, and not being able to kind of the way he's affected by other people and things and perceptions, and how he doesn't think he's good enough for Penny, and it all goes to Penny and her father and his relationship with him and how he feels inadequate and stuff. And then he joins the military for some sense of purpose, the same way he joined the convent before. And in here, he has a hard time, but he's able to get the number from Penny and her promise that she's going to listen to him in, I think it's 8 years, they said, that it would be the time that he would call her. And she's looking at him like he's crazy, but he convinces her to do it. And then you have one of the most beautiful scenes in television history, which is this conversation between Penny and Desmond over the phone, in which, they're finally reconnecting, and Desmond is finally somebody that can be with Penny, that wants to be with her, that will commit to being with her. But now he's trapped, and she's looking for him, and she's desperate to find him, and she's been looking for him this whole time. And she brings up Charlie, and when she had heard from him and was trying to find him, and how she'd been looking for him for 3 years since he disappeared. And you have this beautiful cut together moment between the two of them on the phone with just amazing music. And that episode was directed by Jack Bender, I believe, who did some of the best episodes of Game of Thrones too. He did the Hold the Door episode of Game of Thrones, which is a very Lost kind of moment if you think about it.
That is a very Lost kind of moment, actually. It is. Even does the same thing as the Constant, because we see Hodor mentally time traveling to his past self, which is okay.
And then Hodor really shocks us when he says, hold the door, hold the door, hold the door in another life, brother.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's Jack Bender that directed that episode of Game of Thrones, and he directed a lot of the episodes of Lost. He was kind of every TV show kind of has a primary director, the director that's the biggest influence on the show. Mm-hmm. And Jack Bender was it for Lost, even though it was J.J. Abrams did the pilot. Jack Bender was the main director on Lost. He was the guy that was the producer that was really in charge.
I noticed on a lot of shows, the showrunner tends to do directs the fewest episodes. Normally big episodes like premieres or finales are the showrunner will direct, but anything in between occasionally maybe, but it's mostly director characters like Jack Bender do. Like a lot of episodes.
They tend to bring on, and sometimes it happens like seasons in or something, but they bring on a director who will work frequently on the show and who like ends up having like a real voice in the creation of the show, where the showrunner usually runs kind of everything. And some showrunners direct, some don't. Like Damon Lindelof doesn't direct, he just writes.
Right.
And he acts as a showrunner, but he doesn't direct episodes. But he'll establish a relationship with somebody like a Jack Bender in the case of Lost, and they'll work out stuff together, like between Jack Bender, Lindelof, and Hughes. We'll work stuff out together, and Bender will actually be part of the creative process, where most directors are like hired guns on TV.
Right. Desmond makes contact with Penny, and Desmond's cured, and we don't see Desmond having any issues with time traveling or seeing the future again.
Yeah, not this season.
Not this season, at least. And Desmond goes into being more of a background player at this point.
Yes. Which is a little unfortunate, but like it fits to the needs of the story. I think if they tried to kind of shoehorn more importance for him in the season, it wouldn't have worked.
Right, yeah, it wouldn't have worked. What they're doing with the story doesn't require Desmond to be too terribly active.
Sometimes less is more.
Yes.
So that's kind of like, I think when we were getting ready to talk about season 4, that was probably the thing that the two of us wanted to talk about most, was just the continent.
I think so. Well, it is objectively the best episode of the series.
Yes.
So we'd be remiss if we didn't do a deep dive on that episode.
So what else is there that we need to cover about season 4 before we go? I mean, we don't have to dive into every event of the series. This is a companion piece to a rewatch. So hopefully anybody listening to this is watching.
Hopefully you watched this.
Yeah. So we don't need to like explain this to everybody in detail. We're just kind of giving our perspective and, what we think about the certain things. We talked about Ben's kind of evolution. We talked about the constant. We talked about the introduction of these new characters and kind of their role in the series. That's kind of the main points. And we mentioned in the flash forward.
Jen dies at the end. I guess we can mention Michael comes back. He's reintroduced as Ben's spy on the freighter.
That was an interesting way to bring him back, as being like his whole life, him going off the island, everything fell apart. And that's like a theme of season 4 that actually started in the season 3 finale with Jack. The idea that like these people, they get off the island and they return to the real world and everything just kind of falls apart.
Yeah, everything kind of falls apart. Walt is taken away from him again, this time by his own mother, who Walt doesn't, because he foolishly tells Walt what he did to get him back, and now Walt hates his guts, rightfully so. I said when Michael, killed Anna Lucia and Libby, in his pursuit to get Walt back, I was just thinking, you think if Walt ever learned about that, Walt's going to want anything to do with you, dude? And it turned, it's like, yeah, it turned out to be true. Walt wants nothing to do with him after he told Walt what he did.
So Michael, with that being the kind of, with the guilt of what he did, with the whole purpose of why he did it now being kind of against him with this, with Walt, like, wanting nothing to do with him, and all the guilt weighing down on him for what he did, and just kind of him not having anything else in his life at the point in which he took Walt on, before he even got to the island, when he went to pick up Walt. That was like all he had going in his life. He had nothing going for him. He kind of gave up everything for that moment. So he returns, he can't even be himself because he can't let anybody know that he was on 815.
No.
He has to like lie. So like he can't even like return to any semblance of his life. So it's like he has nothing. And so he becomes suicidal.
Yeah.
But the island has other plans for him, and that doesn't work.
Yeah,
all of his suicide attempts fail.
Yeah, Tom from the island shows up and basically tells him the island won't let him die. He's got work to do.
He's like, I'll give you a job as a janitor. The island wants you to be a janitor.
Yeah, the island wants you to be a janitor on a boat. Yeah. He ends up being Ben's spy on the freighter and changing his name to Kevin Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And basically his job, initially, like, he's given, like, these explosives, and he thinks his job is to blow up the freighter, but really his job was to just, Ben tells him his job is to disable the engines, install the freighter, and make sure that it can't reach the island.
Yeah. He actually goes to detonate the bomb, and and when the timer goes up and everything, and he's like holding his eyes shut, and he's like preparing for the explosion, like, I'm finally gonna die. Instead, like, a flag pops up with like a message on it, and he grabs the message off of the flag and unrolls it, and it basically says, not yet.
Yeah.
And he's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it says not yet. And his redemption comes towards the end of the season when they find out Kimi set up all the C4 and set up a remote explosive.
Yeah, we had mentioned earlier in the episode about Ben killing Kimi and like how Locke said, you just killed everybody on the freighter, and Ben saying like, so? Now we're getting into what that means.
Yeah, because Kimi set up all these explosives, and Kimi set it up. So this was Kimi's like little plan in his head, I guess.
His insurance policy.
His insurance policy, where if he died, then everybody on the freighter would die. You know,
Yeah.
and that's what he used when he confronted Ben after they thought they killed him because Kimi got into a scuff with them, and Richard kind of showed up and shot him in the back, but Kimi was wearing body armor, so it didn't quite work. But Kimi was confronting Ben and Locke in the Orchard, and basically, like, he was telling them, you know, I have this, you know, connected to a bomb on the freighter, and if you kill me, that bomb's going to go off. Meanwhile, Desmond, Jin, and Michael are have discovered this and are frantically trying to find a way to disable it.
Well, this happens because Desmond's talking to not the captain of the boat because he's like dead, but the guy that's steering it, and he says he can't see the reefs. The pilot with their equipment because something's jamming up the signals.
Yeah.
There's a radio signal interference, and he's like, so we can't go any closer to the island until we clear this up. And Desmond's like, well, I'll go find it. So he goes and he looks and he finds this giant bomb.
The interference is this remote controlled bomb.
Yeah. So he goes and he grabs Desmond and Jin, who arrived on the island with Sun from you know all the ferrying that Faraday's been doing to get people onto the freighter.
Now Desmond explains like he has some limited experience with disarming bombs from
Basically
his time
just
in the
knows
military.
just enough to blow himself up.
Yeah, he's like just knows enough to blow himself up, but the bomb's pretty well designed and they can't find a way to disable it.
Yeah, I love Desmond's explanation. He's like, you know, he's all, you cut this wire, boom. You cut that wire, boom. You disconnect these valves, boom.
But
you give up and play solitaire, boom.
But to make a long story short, they never find a way to disable the bomb. And so what happens is Desmond jets out of there. You know, Michael and Jin are sticking around, and Jin is kind of adamant that he's going to stick with Michael and help him, but Michael just tells him, no, you got a baby on the way now, you have a wife, you have something to live for, you need to get up there and be with her.
Well, Michael finds a way to delay it before...
Yeah. Well, he finds a scene. I'm trying to make a long story short, though. So... I
think it's kind of necessary because he's using liquid nitrogen to spray on the leads of the bomb so that even if the radio is signaled to go off, if the leads are frozen, it won't go off. And that's the only thing they can do to stop the bomb from going off is to
they're able to delay
keep the leads frozen, but they can only do that for so long with the liquid nitrogen. And they're like, oh, how do we even know if it's going to work? And he says, well, if that light, goes off and we're still alive, then it's working. And that's what ends up happening because we talked about Ben kills Kimi and that light switches and you just see the oh shit moment on everyone's face because they're basically being kept alive by the leads being frozen and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Michael is still trying to kind of keep it, frozen, but at a certain point he runs out or he's almost out of liquid nitrogen and he looks over at Jin and he's like, you need to get out of here because Jin was trying to figure out a way to still disable it at this point. And he's like, it's not going to work. We don't have enough time and there's not enough of this left. You need to get out of here. You're going to be a father. So Jin says thank you and he leaves. As this is happening, you said Desmond ran off. That was because the helicopter, which is rapidly running out of fuel, was coming to land, and Desmond's flagging them off, no, you can't land. This
that's right.
Blow up.
Desmond was trying to warn everybody away.
And they're like, "What is Desmond saying? Did he say something about a bomb?" And Lapidus is like, "I don't care what he's saying. I don't have any fuel. I need to stop now." And so they get on the boat, and they're led into everything that's going on. So they're immediately just filling up patching up the holes and filling up the helicopter with gas from the freighter as quick as they can with the plan to go back to the island. So they're doing this. Michael's keeping that thing, frozen as long as he can. And then they end up getting off Lapidus ends up leaving with the helicopter, but it's before Jin can get on the helicopter. They're like trying to get out of there as quick as they can.
Jin doesn't make it off. And the interesting thing is Michael runs out of liquid nitrogen, and so he's no longer able to delay it. Kimi is dead, so it's about to blow, and the last thing Michael sees is Christian Shepherd,
Jack's father, who is kind of like now, like I guess like a go-between between like the island and Jacob. Yeah, he's like kind of the voice of the island right now, I guess.
Yeah, kind of Jacob's messenger, I guess, right now.
At least that's what we're told.
Yeah, at least that's what he says. He says, I speak. He tells Locke that he speaks for Jacob.
Yeah.
You know, also Claire is in the cabin with him for some reason, but because he appeared, he appears before Michael, and he says something like, "It's time now, Michael." You know, basically like, you can die now.
Yeah, and the freighter blows up as the helicopter's taken off. Jin wasn't able to get on the helicopter. Sun's frantic. So the helicopter's like, you know, everyone in the helicopter like, we need to get back to the island. They're heading back to the island. This is the last kind of important thing we need to address, probably.
Yeah, this is so sadly, Michael and Jin both die on the freighter. 2 major deaths in this episode. It's kind of crushing, but damn.
And so now this helicopter is trying to go back to the island, and Ben and Locke, now that Kimi's dead, are, you know, it's hilarious. Like, Ben starts loading up. They have this vault or this container. It looks kind of like the thing from The Fly.
Yeah.
And he's like loading it up with all stuff, and Locke keeps asking questions. He's all, just watch this Dharma video, you know, get out of my hair. And it's funny because as he's watching it, it's saying like, do not under any circumstances put inorganic or metal material in the vault. And Locke just looks up, and that's all Ben is doing.
But Ben's doing it to blow a hole into so he can get to the wheel that he needs to turn to move the island.
Yeah, there's a Dharma wheel. Like, literally, there's something called a Dharma wheel. And that's literally what's in the island. Like, in real life, there's something called a Dharma wheel.
Oh, okay.
And it's like from mythology. And there's like a literal Dharma wheel in this island.
In the island. So, yeah. And what's interesting about it, too, is because Ben tells Locke, because Locke says, you know, like, Ben's going in there, and Locke is like, I should do it. And Ben points out to Locke, you know, Jacob told you what you needed to do, but he didn't tell you how to do it. And that is because Jacob wants me to suffer the consequences. Mm-hmm. And Locke is like, what consequences are that? And Ben's just like, I have to leave the island. You know,
I can never come back.
Right? I can never come back.
So Ben goes into this like frozen area. It's like, we talked about scene being very like from Game of Thrones being very lost. This frozen area is very Game of Thrones.
Yes, yeah, it is.
It's this frozen area with this wheel embedded in this wall, and he has to like push this wheel, and he has to break the ice in it, and he's really struggling to push this wheel, but he pushes it, he gets the wheel moving, and a light from behind where the wheel is starts glowing out, and you start to hear that like electromagnetic energy sound that we heard when the hatch like was about to explode.
Right.
That kind of humming sound is like electromagnetic energy was building up. And Ben's moving it, and as he's pushing it, just lights up, and then it fades off. Like, that's the last we see of Ben in the season. And then we showed the light flashing for everybody on the island. We showed the light flash, you know, in front of the people in the helicopter, and the island disappears in front of them. And this is bad news because that helicopter only had enough fuel to get them from the freighter to the island. And once the island disappears, Lapidus doesn't know where to go. And the helicopter... Jack points out that there was a smaller island, but that went with the island.
Yeah, that went with the bigger island. And the helicopter runs out of fuel and crashes into the ocean. Not before
they're able to throw out the life raft.
Yeah, not before they can get out a life raft and thankfully luckily enough, it just happens to be big enough for all of them. You know? All 8 of them.
Yeah. The 6 of them, well, there's 9, really, if you count the baby.
No, because the Oceanic 6 is including the baby.
No, is it?
Yeah, it is, because it's Jack, Kate, Saeed, Sun,
Hurley,
Jack, Kate, Saeed, Sun, Hurley. Who is
and the baby?
6th? Okay. Yeah, if not the baby, yes. So
plus there's Lapidus and Desmond.
Yeah, 8 people.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I said.
Okay. So then you have the 8 of them all on this life raft, and they're basically like, okay, we're fucked. Like, what's going to happen now?
And they're found by Penny's boat.
Penny's actual boat. Charlie's corpse swam up from the ocean,
and said,
scratched out knot on his hand.
Said, yes, Penny's boat.
And put his hand up and then slowly sunk back down.
Yeah, yes, Penny's boat. Yeah, Penny's actual boat, who she is there precisely because Desmond contacted her in The Constant.
Yes. And so she comes and she saves them, but Jack tells everybody that they're going to have to lie because of everything that's going on to orchestrate, the cover up of the crash and everything like that. That not only they are at risk, but everybody on the island is at risk. That's still on the island is at risk. And in order to kind of protect themselves and them, they need to lie. They need to feed into the story that already exists and kind of develop it from there. Because they can't just go like, oh yeah, the plane at the bottom of the ocean, that wasn't our plane.
Yeah, yeah.
They can't say that because that's obviously going to cause
Well, it sticks with Jack because Locke tells Jack earlier. Locke tells Jack that Jack's going to have to lie.
Yeah.
And Jack's kind of resistant to the idea, but by the time Jack's on Penny's boat, Jack's committed to the idea that everybody has to lie, and he's trying to convince everybody else.
And so, yeah, that's basically the end of the season is that, but before the finale, we already even had the sequence where they were reunited with their families, all that stuff. That doesn't happen in the finale here. This is we already saw that.
Right.
We're seeing right now the kind of moment in which they all know that they're going to have to lie. And, the last scene we get in this season is a continuation of what happened in the last season finale with Jack. We saw Jack visit this, funeral parlor, before. In season.
Okay, we should preface this. Can't even talk. We should preface this by, I think it was the season 3 finale where we learned that somebody had died and Jack was all broken up about it, and even Kate. But they asked, Kate said, "Why would I go to his funeral?" And when Jack showed up, they asked Jack, friend or family, and Jack says neither. But it's been this big mystery of, who died? Who's in the casket?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Well, they reveal early in season 4 that it's Jeremy Bentham.
Yeah, but who the fuck's Jeremy Bentham?
Exactly.
And why does Jack care? Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
There's a few moments where, there's even a moment, I think, at one point where somebody said, why are we saying Jeremy Bentham? His name is, and then the person's, cut off.
Yeah, they're cut off.
Don't say it,
So, yeah, it's somebody important, and they're playing coy with you, but they won't reveal
We know it's somebody we already know, and that they're just hiding who it is.
Yeah, they're just hiding who it is. We don't know. This mystery is dragged from the season 3 finale all the way to the end of the season finale for season 4.
Yeah, it's the last scene of the season 4 finale, in which Jack goes into this funeral parlor. He opens up the casket. He's looking at. We don't see who's in it.
No, but Ben shows up.
Having a breakdown. Ben shows up.
Yeah,
and Ben's kind of going along with the whole you need to go back. You need to get everybody to go back, and this is how we're going to do it. We need to get everybody, and then
he goes, and then Jack's about to leave, and then Ben just goes, including him, and motions to the casket.
Yeah, we get the reveal. We get the reveal of who's in the casket, and it's John Locke.
Yes. This, when I first saw it, upset me because I was like, no. I was like, no, he's one of the best characters. How could they do this? That was my initial reaction when I first watched it. I was like, what are they doing? What is this?
But this isn't like a regular character death because everyth's so out of order time-wise right now. Yeah. This is something that we're going to build up to throughout season 5.
Again, this is at the time where Ben's recruiting everybody to go back to the island. We're 3 years removed from the events happening on the island.
This is the moment where it's 3 years ahead.
Yeah, so Locke is still alive on the island when we get to the island stuff, but this is in the future. We just know Locke is heading towards a point in time where he is going to die.
Mm-hmm. And so that's the end of season 4, the best season of the show, featuring the best episode of the show, which is also perhaps the best episode of television.
Yes.
A great season. I've been looking forward to kind of talking about this since we started. This is the big thing. It's like with Game of Thrones when the showrunners for Game of Thrones got the show, they said that they only really cared about getting to basically what ended up being like the penultimate of season 3 because they wanted to get to the red wedding. That was like the big moment that they wanted to get to. That was like their whole reason to do the show, and where they wanted to get to was that moment.
Right.
And for Lost, I think it was season 4. That is like the equivalent, like the constant and the kind of events that happen with like the flash forwards coming to fruition and everything that happens there. That's like the pinnacle of Lost.
That is definitely the pinnacle. Yeah, this is definitely the pinnacle of Lost.
That's not to say like it's all downhill from here or anything.
It's not
like
all downhill, but I think it's more uneven, and also like it takes like a big swerve into hard sci-fi, and that kind of like, even though like Lost has flirted so far with sci-fi elements, it hasn't fully embraced it. Mm-hmm. It goes hard sci-fi, and it depends on your opinion of that, whether or not your opinion of the series going forward.
Yeah, well, season 5 goes hard sci-fi. Season 6 goes hard faith. You know, like they kind of both go. Like it's interesting because those are the two main dynamics of the show. Is like, or not two main dynamics, but the main dynamic is the relationship between science and faith.
Yeah, relationship.
It's like the big thing. And then in the last 2 seasons of the show, it's one is science and the other is faith, basically.
And I still don't know how I feel about season 6, but we'll find out when I watch it again.
Yeah,
because then I will have a chance to evaluate it and tell you if it is as terrible as people say it is. But that's for the future.
Well, I can answer that right now. It isn't.
Yeah.
Because that's always the case. It never is as bad as the people that overreact and freak out make things to be.
Right.
Season 8 of Game of Thrones was not great. It also was nowhere near as bad as people made it out to be.
Right.
Like the hype, the overreaction stuff is never the baseline.
But God,
always the extreme.
The reactions in season 6 of Lost, you still get people to this day calling Lindelof a hack and writing off anything he does.
Yeah, pretty much.
Based on, and just citing this, season 6 of Lost as, the reason.
Which is very unfair, but
yeah.
it's we'll see what our opinions are on that, if they've evolved or changed when we reach the end of it. I always try to tell people, like, if you were pissed off by the ending of Lost, and you use that as a reason to never explore the series again, I think that's kind of backwards, because if not getting the answers you wanted is what pissed you off so much, then if you rewatch it, you're doing so with the knowledge that you're not getting those answers.
Right.
So it should actually be a better rewatch than what you saw the first time, because you're going in knowing you're not getting something that you wanted. You know what I mean? It's like, so you get all the moments you love, but without that expectation that you're getting something else out of it. And honestly, I think it does deliver a lot of stuff by the end. It doesn't give all the answers, but I don't think anything can. I don't think giving all the answers is the right idea. That's what you call the midichlorian problem. That's what tanked Star Wars, was giving all the answers.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not always the best way to do it. And whether you like the balance of how they handled it or not is, that's of course going to be subjective. But yeah, I think it's a show that deserves a rewatch, so I'm really glad we're doing it. And I mean, outside of if it's worth it by the end, it's worth it just for the fact that we got to rewatch season 4.
Yes, I agree.
In a vacuum, season 4 was worth everything. So yeah. That's it for this episode, basically. We're wrapping up now. So next week, we're finally going to get to the Magicians series finale. It has been about a month since that episode has aired. We're finally going to discuss it. Things have been a little bit crazy because we had, with the Lost rewatch, we had season 3. Then we had our 250th episode, which we always do, Advocates of Great Television. Then we had season 4 because season 4 was short. So we've had this long gap before we could finally talk about the Magician's finale, but we are going to do that next week. So if you are listening to this podcast and are like, when the fuck are they going to talk about the Magicians again? It already ended. What the hell's going on? That's next week. So look forward to that. In the meantime, here's what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're recording this on Monday, April 20th. Tomorrow, April 21st, Nicky Jam El Granador comes to Netflix. On Thursday, April 23rd, Sanctuary to Sundance Now. Ghost in the Shell SAC 2045 to Netflix. La Casa de las Flores to Netflix. On Friday, April 24th, the Defending Jacob miniseries comes to Apple TV. That's got a Captain America in it, Chris Evans. Love 101 comes to Netflix, and Afterlife comes to Netflix. That's season 2 of the Ricky Gervais show about a character who loses his wife and is like suffering the misery of that, basically. Sunday, April 26, 2020, Penny Dreadful City of Angels comes to Showtime. That's the sequel series to Penny Dreadful, which was about like a lot of Victorian literature figures, like monsters from Victorian literature, like Dracula and Frankenstein and things like that, all kind of connecting those together into like one world. This is City of Angels, takes place in, I think it's in Los Angeles. It's still in the past, but it's not Victorian era, obviously. And then Vita comes to Stars, and The Last Kingdom returns on Netflix. On Monday, April 27th, Never Have I Ever comes to Netflix. On Wednesday, April 29th, Normal People to Hulu, Extracurricular to Netflix, and Summertime to Netflix. On Thursday, April 30th, Council of Dads to NBC, Drifting Dragons, it's an anime series, to Netflix, The Forest of Love Deep Cut to Netflix, and The Victim's Game to Netflix. On Friday, May 1st, Trying comes to Apple TV+, Betty to HBO, Upload to Amazon Prime. That's got Arrow's brother in it. Is it Robbie Amell? He was Firestorm when Firestorm was first on.
Right.
On Arrow and Flash and all that stuff before it was the other two, or the other guy.
Oh yeah, the other guy, yeah.
Yeah. So it's him, he's in the show. It's about it's basically San Junipero as a TV series.
Oh.
It's a guy who's dying and he uploads his consciousness into a server, and it's about kind of like the afterlife in the server.
Interesting.
So it's kind of San Junipero the series. Hollywood miniseries comes to Netflix as well that day. And then lastly on Sunday, May 3rd, Billions returns to Showtime, and Rick and Morty returns to Adult Swim. So I know a lot of people are chomping at the bit for that. That's the second half of the season, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. Already said, next week, The Magicians series finale. We'll be discussing just that. Until then, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best